Okay, we have CO2 air and oxygenated air. I'm going to start with the CO2 air. CO2 air comes from two different places into our heart. The first place is by our lungs, and that CO2 air goes into the superior vena cava. The superior vena cava is this long blue structure. However, at the same time, it also comes in by way of our capillaries. Our capillaries are below. The capillary CO2 air comes in through our inferior vena cava at the same time. These two will work simultaneously. It's always flowing. It's not ever stopping. So, once the CO2 air has entered into our superior vena cava, and the inferior vena cava, all the CO2 air flows into the right atrium. The CO2 air, CO2 blood fills the right atrium. Once the right atrium is full, it will constrict, it will constrict, it will flow through this right AV valve, also our tricuspid valve. From there, it crosses over our tendinous cords into the right ventricle. The CO2 air will fill up the right ventricle. Once CO2 air has filled up in the right ventricle, it continues to the pulmonary valve. Once the right ventricle is full, the pulmonary valve will take the CO2 air and allow it to enter into the pulmonary trunk. From the pulmonary trunk, the CO2 oxygenated blood flows up and is distributed to our lungs by the right and left pulmonary arteries. Right and left pulmonary arteries. From the arteries, the CO2 air will fill up our lungs, where it unloads the CO2 air and exchanges it for the oxygenated air. Once the oxygenated air is ready, the blood will return from the lungs by the pulmonary veins. These are the left pulmonary veins. The oxygenated air enters the left pulmonary veins, travels down into our left atrium. This whole pink area is the left atrium. As it fills up with the oxygenated air, it travels down to the aortic valve, it travels down into the left AV valve, the left AV valve, or the bicuspid valve is the same thing. Call it the bicuspid valve. Then it travels down. These are tendinous cords into the left ventricle. This whole area is the left ventricle. The oxygenated air travels from the left ventricle, fills it up completely, which then triggers our aortic valve to open. The oxygenated blood flows through the AV valve. Contraction of the left ventricle forces the aortic valve open. The oxygenated blood flows through the aortic valve. So we have oxygenated blood flowing through the aortic valve into the ascending aorta. This is the ascending aorta. Blood in the aorta comes up and is then distributed into every organ in the body, where it unloads oxygenated blood and loads carbon dioxide blood. As it flows throughout our whole body, blood will return. If it's through the lungs, it will return through the superior vena cava. If it is through the capillaries, it will return through the inferior vena cava. And this repeats. It doesn't stop.